Good morning, one and all. This is Dr. Diana. We have been doing a revision on modern software engineering. This is session 28, and as of now, we have completed units 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we started with revision of unit 1. In unit 1, we have seen what are the basic principles in Agile, how Agile came into existence, and what was the driving force behind agility in software engineering, and what is extreme programming, and all these basics we have looked into in the previous 2 sessions. And we identified that the success of any software development is from 3 different aspects: the organizational success, the technical success, and the personal success. And to address all aspects of this success, we moved on into agile software development from the traditional approaches. And in order to achieve all 3 forms of success, we are not going to follow any protocol or a process. We are just going to change our mindset and our perspective on software development. So that gives the agile development a fresh look on things. So we are going to still program, still code, still test, and all that remains the same. We are going to plan, but we are going to design. The difference is that we are going to do them a little more differently than what we did in the traditional programming approach. So we have seen what the Agile manifesto is, how we think about individuals over interactions, software over documentation, people over process, all this. And then we have seen 12 different agile principles that can help us adhere to the Agile manifesto. And then we have seen what extreme programming is. Extreme programming is an environment where you build software and you provide a release every week or in 2 weeks time. Every time you deliver, the period of working is called as an iteration. The iteration, you can have multiple iterations before you deliver your complete software. So every time there is an iteration, you give a release to the customer, you give a deliverable, and you can get paid for your deliverable. And in every iteration, you still have the same plan, design, code, test, and deploy phases. And this is going to repeat, and you can incrementally design your software over multiple iterations. That's what we have seen in extreme programming. And now we are going to look into further details of extreme programming. How do you make your team think on agility? We told that agile development is nothing but a change in mindset or the perspective. So it is our thinking that has to be modified first. How do we modify the thinking into agility or into becoming more adaptable? So we will look into some of the strategies that can help us change our thinking from the traditional perspective into the agile perspective. The second half of first unit deals with the thinking aspect of agility, and we'll be seeing some of those in this session. And we see extreme programming does not require any special expert to teach you how to program in an agile environment. We are going to do the same thing, but it requires a habit of mindfulness or some thoughtfulness going into it. Whatever we did earlier, we are going to do it more efficiently with certain practices. 5 practices in Agile have become the baseline for developing mindful developers. The first one is called pair programming. Pair programming is where you allow 2 people to do the same work. It doubles the brain power available during coding and gives each person the opportunity to think about strategic and long-term issues. So if you assign a piece of code to be written by someone, you assign the same piece of code to two people and they work together to come up with a solution. And then you have energized work. Even if when we look into the development environment, people just sit and code. Even if they do it for 10 hours, there is somebody who is more motivated than that person and can complete the same work in 1 hour. So we see the motivation level of that particular employee gives a direct impact on the volume of work that is done in a very effective time limit. So it happens when the employee is motivated by themselves. So when you give that work allotted to work to somebody who is motivated, you get a work that is in full, in good volume, in less amount of time. That is called as the energized work. The energized work acknowledges that the developers do their best and their most productive work when they are energized and motivated. So you identify ways in which you can create energized work, and then you can go in for an informative workspace. An informative workspace allows you to communicate effectively to other team members by displaying some of the basic ideas of what you are doing and what your team is doing and what is the function that you are working on to other people, even without having to conduct an official formal meeting. And then you can move on into root cause analysis. When we look into the traditional software development approach, we first gather some requirements from the client and then we start working on it. We start our development and then we go deploy. Once we deploy, we see that once the software is deployed, we see that there is a lot of gap between what the customer was expecting and what we have given them. It is primarily because there is a gap. There are two gaps available there. One gap is our code from the requirement specification. So whatever was mentioned in the requirement specification, we might not be able to complete. So that there is a gap between the requirement specification and the code that is developed. That is one form of gap. The other gap is what the customer was really expecting and that which failed to make an entry in the requirement specification document. So when somebody gathered requirements itself, some of the expectation of the customer was lost and it did not make into the requirement specification document at all. So that gap is very hard to make up for. So in that aspect, when we look and think, we probably have to identify the root causes of something when we identify a bug. When a bug is identified, try getting back to the client to see what exactly is the gray space around that bug. If you can clear off the gray areas then and there, might be both of these gaps can be addressed before deployment. That's the basic idea of root cause analysis. So when you find something that's hard to work, that is not giving you the expected result, then go back and identify the process and check if your process is working good. It's a useful tool for identifying the underlying basic cause of certain problems. And then the next aspect of thinking agile is retrospective. Retrospective means thinking back, looking back on something and meditating over it. Retrospective provides a way to analyze and to improve the entire development process. So when we looked into the extreme programming, we saw multiple iterations and each iteration with a plan, design, develop, test and deploy phase. In each iteration, we are going to add a retrospective where we look back into what we have accomplished and we also state what we are going to do next. This helps the entire team to stay focused on the development process so that the entire work can be energized. All these practices require a lot of change in the mindset. So to start with, we will start with what pair programming is. The idea behind pair programming is make people succeed by helping each other. So instead of one person coding, we are going to put two people working together. And when we pair, one person always writes the code and he is going to be called as the driver. The other person is called as the navigator. The job of the navigator is to think. Now, as a navigator, sometimes you might think about what the driver is typing. Sometimes you may think about what tasks to work on next. And sometimes you think about how your work fits best into an overall design. All these thoughts go into the navigator while the driver is writing code. They might get a lot of questions about the code that the driver is writing. So when they have a discussion and when they come to a conclusion, the code that is prepared by both of them naturally is better than one person's thinking. So that's the basic idea behind pair programming. This arrangement leaves the driver free to work on the tactical challenges of creating a rigorous, syntactically correct code without worrying about the big picture. It gives the navigator the opportunity to consider strategic issues without being distracted by the details of coding. So both aspects are being thought of before the piece of code is finished. And pairing also reinforces good programming habits, because somebody is watching, the driver is going to write better code. And to keep everybody under the motivation, you can get by switching your partners. So every now and then you can switch your pairs. There are a few tips you can adopt while doing pair programming. Pair on everything you'll need to maintain. Say for example, if you need a report that is to be maintained later, create a pair for programming that way. And allow pairs to form fluidly rather than assigning partners. Don't be stringent in assigning partners to people. Let them choose and let them flow by themselves. And whenever you feel its work is getting down, or when you feel bored, just switch partners. It can help you find a better and a fresh perspective on things. And avoid pairing with the same person for more than a day at a time. So you can change your partner every day so that you keep the work going and you're still motivated high enough. And then your space that you pair along with, it should be able to seat two people comfortably well side by side. And when you produce code through conversation, make sure that you collaborate and do not critique. So if your navigator is continuously going to point at you, oh that semicolon, oh that capital F and all that, it becomes really cumbersome. So try avoiding things like that. Work together on a collaborative level. And every time you switch partners, you can also switch roles. A driver who has been coding for a day can sit as a navigator in the next day. So that will help in a better motivation level of the development team. And then there are certain physical structures called as pairing stations. These are cubicle environments which can give you environment for two people to work together. So these can be a divided screen or a virtual environment where both of them can share screens and all that. That's called as a pairing station. You need plenty of room for both people to sit side by side. Typical cubicle with a workstation located in a corner won't work anymore. And it should be comfortable. And when you allow two people to work together, people with the same level of skill and mindset, it will be easier for you to collaborate together. So if they have mismatched skills, pairing can be really difficult. And every time you try to pair, the communication between the pairing partners is very, very essential. So if people lack communication skill, pair programming can be really difficult. Once you come up with a good motivation level, once you start pair programming, you can see that two people are enjoying working together, and you can get more work, and you can then talk about what energized work is. We work at a pace that allows us to do our best, most productive work indefinitely. So imagine I have a goodwill for the institution that I work in, and my work is completely energized. Somebody there's no requirement for someone else to push behind my back to asking me to work. So that's the idea behind agile development. You give me the space where I can work, and you keep me motivated. I'll do the work which is required for my profile, and I'll do it more productively than when I am pushed or when I'm stressed. One of the simplest way to be energized is to take care of yourself. Go home on time every day. This is a very, very mandate in agile development environment. Not many of the managements would be supportive of this, but it is always good to go home on time every day. Spend some time with the family and friends and engage in activities that take your mind out of the work. And then you should eat healthy foods, exercise, and get plenty of sleep. So that the work that you do the next day would be highly productive. And also, as a coach of the entire team, it is a duty and responsibility on their part to remind people to go home on time. This is very, very essential in agile development. There's somebody who's keeping up the time clock in the traditional environment who just keep pushing over the deadlines. It is right opposite in the agile development environment, where people are asked to leave home on time. Because the idea is tired people make a lot of mistakes, and they take shorter ways of doing things that end up in errors or less efficient pieces of code. The resulting errors can end up costing more than what the work they have created. So pair programming is another way to encourage energized work. It encourages focus like no other practice that I know of. So it's pair programming that's always really, really good to keep the work productive. Now, you can also encourage people to take breaks in between, and don't force everybody to take breaks at the same time. Stop when you are making more mistakes than you progress. So imagine there's a very productive employee, and all of a sudden he started making a lot of mistakes. It means they need a break. So give them a break. And when the entire team is working very productively, everybody is energized, people are working in pairs, and there's so much of energy around, everybody started working. And when you start working, at some point of time, you will have to need some information from other people. That's quite natural. So if I start developing on a module, I might want to know where this module will fit in. What exactly is the parameter that I'll have to give as output to this module. And all of this requires collaboration with other teams. Now when I try to collaborate, imagine I'll have to go wait at somebody's office and then find out what their work is. That becomes hectic. To avoid that, we are going to use something called as an informative workspace. The objective is that we are tuned into the status of our project. So an informative workspace ensures that everybody is tuned into the status of our project. It's like a cockpit of your development effort. So just like a pilot surrounds himself with necessary information to fly a plane, arrange your workspace with information necessary to steer your project. So any information about your project is available in your workspace. An informative workspace broadcasts information into the room. So when some people take a break during their work and they come over to another place, looking at your workspace, they should be able to gather the idea of what you are working on, what is the big picture in which your module fits, what is the level of progress you have made, what are your inputs and what are your outputs. They'll be able to see all of this in your informative workspace. It's more like a whiteboard where you pin things up, or you can draw jot down things, or a pin board where you can pin up all your post notes and all that. So a space like that is called as an informative workspace. Sometimes when people take a break and walk into other people's informative workspaces, it just results in some spark that lights up them towards their work. It can give a discovery moment for other people who walk inside. This informative workspace also allows people to sense the state of the project just by walking into the room. It conveys status information without interrupting the team members and helps improve stakeholder trust also. Simply poking your head into a project room should give you the information about the project. And that sounds really, really good. An informative workspace, this is what there are certain aspects where you can write "do not erase" in a informative whiteboard. Leaving it there for more than a few days may indicate a problem. It means that the problem has not been solved yet. So you will have to think on those lines little more on that. Big visible charts are a real good part of informative workspaces. The goal of a big visible chart is to display information so simply and unambiguously that it communicates even from across the room. Hand-drawn charts are really good enough, so you don't have to waste your time computerizing your charts. And you can also form process improvement charts that can show the progress of your work, from where you started, what you did, what are the bugs, what are the difficulties that you had, and then how you modified, and then till your success story. All of this can be put into a process improvement chart. Now this is an example of a informative workspace. So it just creates what are the pair combinations for each of the days, and then it shows what is the progress people have made. All of these can be parts of your informative workspace. Now we have seen different practices that can help us think about agility, and once you start thinking in the agile perspective, or when our thinking is adaptable, then our development becomes more efficient and productive, and we are also able to achieve this on time. So that becomes the basis of the agile development principle. So we are going to put this into practice, and we will be revising on some of the other concepts of Unit 1 in the next session. But for now, this is Dr. Diana signing off. Thank you one and all. All the best.